Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2017 State Leadership Panel at this year's Summer Necta meeting. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Mike Nikitas of Neckin. Mike is the primary weeknight news and business anchor at Neckin. He hosts This Week in Business and CEO Corner, and if you're a fan of Neckin, Mike's been a bedrock of that organization, having hosted Neckin's first newscast in 1992. And more importantly, he still plays baseball, and I admire that to know.
That's right.
Mike Nikitas.
All right, thank you very much, John. Hello and welcome once again to the State Leadership Forum here at the annual conference of NECTA, New England Cable and Telecommunications Association, meeting as always here in Newport, Rhode Island. I am Mike Nikitas from NECN. It's great to be back hosting the State Leadership Forum with these folks. This is where we get the pulse of what's going on in state government around New England, all the issues, the accomplishments, and the challenges, and that's what we're going to do over the next 45 to 50 minutes. With me are top elected officials from around the region of New England. Let me introduce them to you. First, to my left, Senator William Gannon, State of New Hampshire. He's a Republican, the Vice Chair of the Transportation, Judiciary, Executive Departments, and Administration Committees, right? Yep. Also with us is Representative Brian Patrick Kennedy of the great state of Rhode Island, Speaker Pro Tem of the Rhode Island House. Good to have you here once again. Representative Patricia Haddad, Democrat of Massachusetts, representing Bristol County, Speaker Pro Tem of the House as well. Representative Thomas Golden, Democrat of Massachusetts from Middlesex County, co-chair of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. Representative Themis Claridis of Connecticut, the House Minority Leader. Good to have you back here once again. And far left from the state of New Hampshire, Senator Lou D'Alessandro, Democrat, Chair of the Capital Budget, Ways and Means Finance Committees. Right, Lou? Are those all the ones? Okay. And also Senator Jeb Bradley of New Hampshire, who is the Senate Majority Leader. So good to have you all here. There's a lot to talk about, and I think the biggest change from last year to this year has been the change in Washington. We have a new administration, and it's a different administration. It's a different party. It's a different person. There's been a lot of controversy coming out of Washington just over the past few days, and that, I think, is a good place to start. What has been, I'd like to start with, maybe we're going to start in New Hampshire, Senator Bradley, what's been the biggest impact of the Trump administration on the way New Hampshire does business, and what has gone on in the state?
Well, you know, I think that all of us in state legislators have our own roles and responsibilities. Certainly, putting together a budget that we just finished in New Hampshire was a big job. Governor Sununu led on that.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. And not every New England state has a budget, so those of us that do, we're pretty happy right now. And Governor Sununu led on the budget and funding for full-day kindergarten. So I think in New Hampshire we have focused primarily, Mike, on what we need to do for a budget. And we're all waiting to see what happens with regard to the health care law. I think every New England state has expanded Medicaid. It's certainly worked well in New Hampshire. It's something that had bipartisan support. So what happens with the Affordable Care Act and the replacement, or what comes next, I think, you know, we're going to see a lot more in 2018. That's probably the biggest thing, at least on my mind right now.
All right, Lou, Senator D'Alessandro, is there still faith, do you believe, at the state level that the changes that this administration is trying to implement are going to happen? Are you still having faith? For example, health care reform.
Well, I think health care reform leaves us all guessing. If I could echo on Jeb's work, we have a budget. We've got an operating budget. We've got a capital budget, so we're in pretty good shape there. What are we concerned about? We're concerned about the uncertainty in Washington, because that could have a dramatic effect on our budget. I mean, anything that twists around Medicaid has a dramatic effect on us. We have depended on the federal participation for a long period of time. Health and Human Services represents 50% of our operating budget. So uncertainty, no one wants uncertainty. That's a feeling that's very, very disconcerting to the membership. And I think anytime you see that happening, the question is, what's next? And with this Trump administration, I think that's our concern. The majority and the minority have worked well together in New Hampshire. We really have worked well. And we did health care reform. The New Hampshire Health Protection Act, quality piece of legislation, done in a bipartisan manner. I was on the committee of conference on that piece of legislation, and Jeb was obviously instrumental and very helpful in getting it done. But anything that in any way alters that process becomes very, very dangerous for our state, and I think for the other states in New England. This has been a program that has been very essential in the lives of New Hampshire citizens. Any disruption is very, very undesirable.
Uncertainty is never good.
Never.
Representative Claridis, you are still grappling with the budget. I know the Republicans have come up with a plan that you outlined and I read about just recently. So that uncertainty, how much is it affecting you right now? The uncertainty from Washington, whether or not he'll be able to implement what he says he wants to do, how is that affecting you as you grapple with a deficit in your budget?
Well, I mean, I think everybody will have the same answer insofar as the health care issues, because it will throw a monkey wrench into things depending on where it turns out. So there have been a lot of people that have been interested in our legislature in kind of preempting that, and I don't take that perspective on it. I think we have to wait and see what happens, and then the holes that are filled, we have to fill and make sure that our citizens are taken care of in the appropriate manner. But as far as budget goes, I mean, we haven't put a budget together. We've put 8 budgets together in 10 weeks, the House and Senate Republicans. And we're still waiting for the House and Senate Democrats to put a budget together. We've had a governor who's operated the state by executive order since July 1st, which is never good for anybody. I don't care what governor that is. I don't think he wants to do it, nor do we want him to do it. But we're just ready, willing, and able to move forward with a budget, and we're very proud of the budget that we've put together. I mean, what goes on in Washington goes on in Washington, and it certainly affects us, but we all are here to lead our states and move our states forward in the way that we need to.
How much belief do you have that you're going to get some traction with the new budget, this 9th budget, if you've had 8 previous, that you're going to have some success with this one?
I'm going to tell you the problem we're having now. In Connecticut, we have had Democrat-controlled House and Senate for 38 of the past 40 years. We have beaten 35 House Democrats in the past 4 election cycles. In the House, we are 4 away from a majority. In the Senate, we're tied with the Democrat lieutenant governor breaking a tie. So the problem now is governing, when you are used to governing, and I don't say it in a critical way, it's just a reality. When you're used to governing with majorities of 10, 20, 30, 40, it's easy to just put something through and allow the people that don't want to vote for it to vote no. But when you have pluralities of such small numbers, I mean, I have 72 members in the House. I have 72 members solid voting for our budget. There's 79 members on the Democrat side of the House. There is nowhere near 76 members, which is a majority to vote for their budget at this point, and that's the problem.
All right, Representative Golden, how is the state of Massachusetts, do you feel, affected most, the way you do business, by what's gone on in Washington?
I would definitely say I'd agree with my colleagues in the sense of the spending coming out with the health care. 40% of our budget is health care spending. So we're looking at anywhere between $15.5 to $16 billion. So any type of deviation or any type of cutback on that, that's going to, I think, affect us very, very much. We have a lot of concerns what's going down in Washington, but we're also very lucky. We just finished our budget. We're in a very good place. The Massachusetts Democrats and the Republicans, we have a Republican governor. We work pretty much hand in glove to make sure that things are moving forward for the Commonwealth and all of its citizens. But talking more about health care, I know Speaker Pro Tem has worked very closely with the budget process, and I might leave some of that stuff to her. But from my end, from the telecommunications utility energy side of the House, I'm a little concerned of what's happening, what seems to me a little bit of turmoil down in D.C. and how that's going to affect our play when it comes to energy in telecommunications up in the Commonwealth.
All right, what in particular? Let's stop and talk about that. This is what this audience is all about. What are you most concerned about?
I'd be most concerned specifically on the energy side. Where are we going with, we're trying to get very aggressive on offshore wind, which once again, Speaker Pro Tem has been one of the leaders on that. Offshore wind as a whole, we're trying to get a cleaner, greener, meaner energy portfolio in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but at the same time, trying to make sure that we have the appropriate base load to make sure that we can welcome all of the businesses that we want into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's some of our concerns. Some of the tax credits could be different, say, in the very near future, I would think, coming out of Washington, and that could affect some of our thoughts for the future when it comes to energy storage, when it comes to offshore wind, things like that.
All right, Representative, you also have this dangling issue of the marijuana bill and how this referendum is going to be implemented. And that, I think, is part of the revenue equation, right? I mean, You're talking about a tax that could go anywhere from 10 or 11% up to 28%. I think those are the latest two extremes that you guys are talking about. How is that issue now working out? You haven't come to an agreement on that yet, right?
We haven't come to an agreement. Both the House and the Senate have been meeting every single day. And they've had agreements on some things, but it's the, the big picture is very hard to guess at how it's going to come out. So we're very concerned with that because it does mean a revenue piece. It means that whatever the tax is has to be enough to run whatever bureaucracy is decided upon. But I just wanted to mention a little something different that Massachusetts that we're doing. The Speaker has seated a special committee of several chairs, myself, and the Majority Leader, and we're looking at policies as they start to bubble up. And we're looking at what we have already filed as bills, and we're asking the committees where these bills are located to have early hearings. So for instance, right now we're looking at access to, which is something I'm very interested in, we're looking at access to contraceptives, which there's recently been some speculation that could change dramatically. So we're going to put that bill out in a hearing very soon, and we're working with the healthcare insurers and other people to come up with something that will be close or copying ACA, as well as maybe getting a little more. So in Massachusetts, we're very concerned about what the policies will mean to things that we've cared about for a very long time. And so in addition to what we're worried about in the budget, we're also worried about changes that could adversely affect closely held positions that Massachusetts has always felt.
So you're taking this approach in the legislature to preemptively try to get ahead of what's coming out of Washington then, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
you think it's worked so far?
It has. As I said, we're working right now on the contraceptive piece. We've done another one around one of our sheriffs had decided that they were going to offer our prisoners to build a wall. We did not feel that there should be money spent, Massachusetts tax money spent in another state, so we've addressed that. It's unfortunate that we're all doing a what if, because it's very exhausting, and I'm sure everybody would say the same thing, trying to figure out what's going to happen. You don't want to waste your energy on that.
Has it been exhausting, Representative Kennedy, in Rhode Island to try to deal with this issue?
So in the state of Rhode Island, we're one of those states that does not have a budget at this point in time. Many people are aware of the fact that on June 30th, the Speaker put the House into recess. The Senate, which had the budget for a number of days, kept on telling us they were going to get to the budget, and then finally, on the afternoon of June 30th, after the Senate Finance Committee had already voted the budget out unanimously, the Speaker received word that the Senate President was going to offer up an amendment to the budget, and it had to do with the Speaker's hallmark, so to speak, that he has been pushing for to phase out the motor vehicle excise tax in the state of Rhode Island. Rather than having the budget returned to us, we went into recess, so the Senate still maintains possession of an amended budget, and as of today, neither the Senate President nor the Speaker have started détente. But we are very concerned, as the others have already spoken about, with so much of our budget is made up of Medicaid reimbursement, but there are other things too. The federal highway funds, whether we can expect those.
Infrastructure improvements, as he promised during the campaign
Right.
and after being elected.
The gas tax, of course, that hasn't been changed now for years. And of course, Mike, one of the big things that affect our states, with the exception of New Hampshire and Alaska, is the Main Street sales tax. So much of that is important to our states. We see more and more of our brick and mortar stores closing up. You probably have never seen so many vacancies in some of these shopping malls around New England, and it's because they can no longer compete with the online sales, and we're not getting those sales tax revenues. So in Rhode Island, the Department of Revenue put forth a proposal, which we've included in our budget, to go after the online sales taxes, and any company that does more than $100,000 worth of business in Rhode Island now must report to our Department of Revenue how much business was done, and they have to either, as an online business, collect the sales tax or notify the person that they owe the sales tax to the state of Rhode Island.
Have any idea how much Amazon checks have been cut to the state of Rhode Island as a result of this?
Amazon has only started collecting sales tax, officially speaking. They announced they were going to do it for the state of Rhode Island, and they announced they were going to do it around the month of March. So I haven't seen how much revenue has already come in from it. And of course, if you believe that Amazon's Prime Day did $1 billion worth of business, which I cannot even fathom, I have to hope that at least several million of that was done by people in Rhode Island shopping.
Hopefully, right? Senator William Gannon of New Hampshire, Republican Vice Chair of the Transportation Judiciary Executive Departments and Administration Committees. We heard from your colleagues down at the end here. What is the biggest impact of Donald Trump as president on the state of New Hampshire?
The biggest impact is very small. Really, we live, I've looked at my state as a small microcosm and just worried about that. And taken care of, I've followed the lead. We have a surplus in our state. We got that through the genius of Jeb Bradley, Chuck Morse, people who have cut our business taxes, cut our business enterprise taxes, and surprise, surprise, our revenues have grown. So now we can afford to live within our means, a small budget, 1.3% increase over the next 2 years. We've got to add beds for, as you know, we're the opioid center of New England for the problem. We've got to add 60 new beds. We have a three-legged approach towards the opioid crisis: enforcement, treatment, education. We've added $4.5 million towards, we added 5 state troopers that are going to work across the border with Massachusetts, because it doesn't stop at a state line. You have to be able to go forward. So we're going to work on keeping the drugs out of the state, educating the kids, and we've added a lot of treatment at the Sununu Center over the last few months.
The senator brings up a huge issue. New England being a microcosm of the country, the opioid crisis is more than a crisis at this point. The numbers are stunning. Last year, 59,000 people in this country died from opioid overdoses. That's more people than were killed in Vietnam and all the Iraq wars. The numbers just are amazing when you think about it, the growth in the number of deaths that have occurred. Little things that we have occurred. When we were at Lou, you and I were out for Comcast Cares Day a couple of days ago, a couple of years ago, excuse me, and cleaning up at a school. And my job was to remove the players' benches from the baseball field. Why? Because people came up and used on those benches at night. So we had to take away the benches and dig them out and throw them away so that people wouldn't use. So those are the kinds of things that happen. What more can government do? I've heard from what New Hampshire's doing, and Senator, if you want to add to that, you've made an attempt. For about 1.5 years ago, we started to change our approach, and it started in Gloucester, Massachusetts with the former police chief. We're not going to prosecute you. If you're a user, you come in, we're not going to prosecute, we'll get you treatment. And then quickly, we ran out of treatment. There's not enough treatment to even use that approach anymore. So what more can government do?
Well, I think in New Hampshire, we have Safe Station, which is a methodology of dealing with the addict and giving him the narcotics so that we can revive him. And we have had more people come to the Manchester Central Fire Station than any city in the state. So that's one situation that we've put in effect that takes care of the user, hopefully, and brings them back. Now, the second thing is we have spent some money in terms of the recovery process. Hope for New Hampshire has been created. A number of private entities, private not-for-profit entities have grown up and are supplying treatment. But let me tell you a couple of things that people don't recognize. You're an addict for the rest of your life. There is no cure. You abate it, but you can't cure it. You got to stay off it. People don't realize that. So it's a lifelong process. And indeed, we have to deal with that through the treatment process. We're working on that in New Hampshire. Manchester has really been a center for this. You know the number of deaths that have occurred in Manchester? And we had 400. That's enormous.
It is now officially the worst drug crisis in American history.
Absolutely.
The numbers, it officially just recently surpassed any numbers from the 60s or 70s.
Sure. Ohio, #1, but we're pretty much #2 in New Hampshire. And it's affected our urban centers, Manchester, Nashua. I think Laconia has been dramatically affected by this. But the narcotics industry has made this a business, and they market that business to beat the band. We have got to abate that, and we've got to come up with solutions that work. Immediate treatment, like the safe stations, elongated treatment in terms of the recovery process, and we've got to sustain it. We put a lot of money into it last year. I think Jeb was instrumental in bringing that money together in a special session of the legislature.
Senator, can you comment on that?
So, yeah, I mean, some of the things that we've done, and we looked a lot at what New Jersey had done before we, in New Hampshire. So we doubled the amount of prevention and recovery and treatment money. We've made much tougher penalties on heroin distribution and fentanyl distribution. We've reformed our insurance laws to make sure people that have insurance have access to treatment, either inpatient or outpatient. We've undertaken a big new mental health initiative because so often mental health and drug problems go hand in hand. So with a lot of new money, I think $20 million in New Hampshire for mental health prevention. So government can't do everything.
Right.
I mean, there is just no way that government can do everything. And this is going to be a long-term fight. It didn't happen overnight. We've also reformed, and I think other states have done the same thing, our prescribing guidelines for physicians. I mean, you know, I recently had some oral surgery done, and of course, just as a routine, this was about a year ago, the dentist asked me, you know, do you want to have some painkillers? And I said, no, aspirin will do fine. And in the past, it would have been routine that you would have left with 30 days worth of OxyContin. And so these laws have now been reformed in New Hampshire because I think with our aging population, we were a state, unlike others, that maybe had illegal use of legal prescriptions as one of the causes of this. And so there's a lot more time that's going to be necessary, I think, to curb this problem, but much has been done.
Much has been done, and it's interesting, at the federal level, just yesterday, the Drug Enforcement Administration put a cap on the number of opioids that pharmaceutical companies can produce. I didn't realize the DEA had purview over production, but they said 25% less opioids next year shall be produced by the pharmaceutical companies in this country to have less of the legal ones out there. So I saw Representative Golden talking.
Thank you very much. And to my neighbors to the north here, I live in the city of Lowell, and some of my friends from Boston think I'm in New Hampshire, since it's just
Well, we'll add you.
moments
No
away.
problem.
But they've done some great work, but I think the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as well has done some great work. When you start to talk about the prescription monitoring program, the increase in beds that we've had, the increase with mental health and substance abuse, sometimes that having a real problem. But I think what leaders here, especially in Massachusetts, what we started to look at is stop pointing that person, it's that person's fault. It may be very well that they became addicted. That is true. But I think we're starting to change that this is an epidemic. This is not something.
It's past an epidemic.
It's a
yeah,
tsunami.
we're way past that.
Of it, you know, this is really, and this is something I think we've been dealing with. I can recall 10 years ago talking about how we need to change the prescription monitoring program, and exactly what my colleagues to the north were saying about with the doctors and the prescribing. And I think that Massachusetts, at least, we've been on the forefront in our area with trying to increase beds